Lugia VSTAR is one of the most powerful Pokemon the Pokemon TCG has ever seen. With the release of Temporal Forces, it becomes even better with some of the brand new cards that synergize perfectly with Lugia. Today, I'm going to be going over how to play the deck in the post rotation and my current deck list for the deck. If you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Alright, let's hop into it. Alrighty, hopping into the engine here, we have Lugia VSTAR, obviously with 280 HP with that Tempest dive for 4 energy, dealing 220 damage. For 4 energy, 220 damage on a VSTAR Pokemon is relatively mediocre, but there is that ability on Lugia which truly is what makes it shine. Its ability, Summoning Star, reads, during your turn, you may put up to 2 colorless Pokemon that don't have a rule box from your discard pile onto your bench, which means that you can use the Summoning Star to be able to get your Archeopsis out with the Primal Turbo, which once during your turn allows you to search your deck for up to 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. We have a brand new card in Cinccino, which we'll go over shortly, which works perfectly with the deck paired up with the Archeops, allowing you to get tons of energies onto the field to attack with very powerful Pokemon like Cinccino and also Snorlax, which still exists. In the Temporal Forces format, decks like Lost Zone Giratina and also Lost Box still exist, so having that Snorlax is very, very nice to be able to help out against those matchups. Next up here are some of the energies that we are going to be using in this deck and the reasonings behind all of them. So starting off, we have Double Turbo Energy, just a very efficient colorless energy. All of our Pokemon require colorless to be able to attack, so just being able to have the Double Turbo Energy just makes attacking with those Pokemon significantly easier. For example, if you're playing up against a Charizard EX deck and you need to get 5 energies onto a Cinccino to take the knockout, you can attach the Double Turbo Energy and then 3 of these single energies, and you are reducing your damage output by 20 because that is the side effect of Double Turbo, but you're reducing from 350 to 330, which is still enough to knock out Charizard in one hit. So playing 4 of the Double Turbo Energy still makes a lot of sense in this deck. Also, it makes attacking with Lugia VSTAR significantly more easy as well. There are some situations where you aren't able to get out the turn 2 Archeops, and you can just attach Double Turbo on turn 1 and turn 2 and at least still use something like that Tempest dive to get some damage on the board, and then the next turn look to use something like that Summoning Star. So having the 4 Double Turbo definitely makes a lot of sense. Gift Energy as well. This is a card that has been used in Lugia decks for quite some time. When your Pokemon gets knocked out, you get to draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand, making your deck Roxanne and Iono proof for the most part, meaning that you're always going to be able to potentially have a solid chance of putting together the pieces that you need to close out games and making sure that you're able to get consistent attackers every single turn. Your deck doesn't have a draw engine like Mew VMAX in the past with Fusion Strike system. You don't have Curlias as well, with things like Refinement. So you need some way to kind of make up for that. So having this, kind of built-in support draw engine as an energy is something that is really, really nice. We have a Therapeutic Energy as well in this deck. Therapeutic Energy is quite good when you attach it onto Snorlax, specifically against those Lost Zone Giratina decks, which still do exist in the post-rotation format, and especially versus Lost Box as well, which has been seeing some play and success in Japan. Being able to make it so that you're not affected by any special conditions is quite nice. V-Guard Energy is not necessarily as important as it used to be, but still is important against those Lost Zone Giratina or Arceus Giratina decks that are trying to one-shot you with that Giratina VSTAR. Making your Lugia, be able to take a hit is very, very nice. It's not as powerful as it used to be. This was a card that a lot of Lugia lists used to play 2 or 3 of, but now you can pretty much just get away with 1 or 2. Mist Energy. This is going to be one of the brand new cards from Temporal Forces. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides a colorless energy and you prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon this card is attached to. So things like Roaring Moon are not going to be able to use things like Frenzied Gouging to be able to take the knockout, because Frenzied Gouging doesn't actually do damage. It's an effect of an attack. Same thing goes with cards like Sableye as well. Sableye's damage output is from an effect of an attack, so you're going to be able to stop those Pokemon from causing issues against you, which is just really powerful. Pretty much almost kills Roaring Moon EX as a deck moving forward, unless they want to put in heavy Temple of Sinnoh. That really is the only way that you can easily counter this card. It also is really good against the Lost Zone Giratina decks as well that are trying to utilize that Star Requiem. You also block them out from doing that. So when you play versus one of those Lost Zone Giratina decks, you can do this really cool play where you put a V-Guard energy onto the Lugia that is in the active, meaning that Lost Impact doesn't knock out, and you can also attach a Mist energy as well, making it so that they can't utilize the Star Requiem to be able to knock you out, either pretty much locking them into forcing to two-shot, which just is not really a very favorable price trade when you have so many one prize attackers that can also one-shot their Giratina's back. We still also play a heavy count of Jet energy as well. Just, you know, having that flexibility is very nice, especially with decks like Snorlax Stall running around. Being able to make sure that, you know, you can get those Pokemon that you're trying to attack with into the active is just very important. Just gives you the flexibility. Definitely a staple card in this deck. These are the special energies that we play. One of the things that really made Lugia more powerful in this format is that we are getting more special energies back. Lugia VSTAR in the past had access to so many different powerful special energies, but over the past couple of months we've lost a lot of those energies from the previous rotation. So it's really nice to see things like Mist energy help the deck out quite a bit. All right, let's move on. Here are just some of the key supporters that I wanted to talk about. We have cards like Professor's Research and also Iono, but the main one that has been getting quite a bit of talk in Lugia VSTAR, which we have been seeing in many of these lists, is going to be the Jock. So what's important to know is that Professor's Burnett is unfortunately rotating out of the standard format, which means that we don't have an easy way to get evolutions, specifically the Archaeopsis, into the discard pile. So Jock does kind of help out. We're able to use the Jock to be able to search your deck for up to 2 evolution Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hands. So you can utilize something like the Luminion's Luminous Sign to grab Jock and then Jock for double Archeops, and then use something like that Ultra Ball to toss them both away and get yourself a Lugia VSTAR. It's not the same as Professor's Burnett, but it does help out quite a bit. Alrighty, hopping into the A-Spec in 2024 in Temporal Forces, we will see the return of A-Specs, and Master Ball is going to be the A-Spec that we have decided to run in this list. And some people might be wondering, why aren't you playing Prime Catcher? Prime Catcher is an insanely powerful card. Well, the reason as to why we have decided for the Master Ball, which just allows you to search your deck for any Pokemon and put it into your hand, is that since you are playing a heavy research-based deck, there will come some games where if you play the Prime Catcher and you have research in your hand early game, you're going to be losing value of Prime Catcher because you're just going to be researching it away. Master Ball is pretty much useful at any time in the game, which is a reason as to why I think Lugia is really going to value from having this card as opposed to something like the Prime Catcher, because if you have a research, you can just use the Master Ball, get a Pokemon, and then put it onto the bench, or just, you know, discard it away with the Professor's Research. Where if you played something like the Prime Catcher, there might be a turn where you don't really want to use the Prime Catcher in the early game, and then you just have to research it away. So, you know, having this, you know, like Master Ball 1 is really important for consistency, and 2 just makes a lot more sense in a deck that is really focusing on, you know, using its draw supporters to burn through the deck. You also have things like Read the Wind as well, so it just makes a lot more sense to have something like that Master Ball in the deck. Here is a potential board state that you might be looking at on the very first turn of the game. Minccino is an incredibly powerful Pokemon. My personal list plays 4. I've been seeing some lists that have been playing 3, even been considering cutting down to 2. I actually think 4 is just so powerful in this deck because you're able to utilize that Call for Family. There are going to be many matchups where you don't necessarily want a Lugia V in the active to potentially get turn 1 Iron Hands, turn 1 Calamity Storm. There's a lot of decks that are kind of roaming around as of right now that can hit very hard, you know, on that first or second turn of the game. So being able to throw up a 1-prizer into the active just kind of makes a lot of sense. So you can utilize that Call for Family, fill up your board state with your Lugia and also 1-prizers to then comfortably go into that turn 2 Summoning Star and having an explosive board state. You really want to be able to streamline your Cinccino's later on in the game, so being able to establish those early onto the field with Call for Family makes a lot of sense. So this is potentially what your board state could look like on that second turn of the game. You could have a Lugia VSTAR in the active, potentially using that Tempest Dive if you're playing against a deck that is not able to one-shot you. But if you're playing against a deck that's, you know, potentially able to one-shot that Lugia VSTAR, you probably want a Pokemon like Cinccino in the active using that special roll attack to be able to knock them out. The rest of your board state ideally is going to have a double Archeops with that Primal Turbo, another Cinccino just in case, and then potentially a Snorlax or a Luminion. In some games, you're going to need to use the Luminion, which then you oftentimes want to use something like Collapse Stadium to then discard that later on. And versus some, Lost Box decks, you really want to have that Snorlax out just because it causes so many issues for decks. You could have potentially a second Cinccino on the bench, or potentially a second Lugia as well, or depending on which one is in the active spot or not. So that's kind of a flex spot as well. So this is kind of what your board state wants to look like on that second turn of the game. This is definitely ideal. There obviously will be some situations where this is not the case, but this is really one of the goals that I try and set every game when I'm playing Lugia VSTAR. Get your board state to look something like this. Here is going to be the list that I have built for you all. This is quite similar to the list that won the Champions League. However, there are a couple of differences. For starters, I don't play Serena. I don't think Serena is necessarily an incredibly powerful card in this deck. Things like Research are just so good just to be able to burn through your deck to make sure you get that consistent turn 2 Archeops out. I also decided to cut the second Collapse Stadium just for a Mezagoza, just to have a little bit more consistency. Lugia in the past has actually played multiple Mezagozas, and I think just having one definitely can, sometimes make the difference between you being able to get the double Archeops into the discard pile turn 2 or not. I also, as I said in a portion of the video earlier, is that I also have the Minccino count at 4. That is also something that I have decided to go with because you really want to start this Pokemon early game. Yes, you could start Read the Wind, which is also fine, but it just increases your chances of starting either Minccino or Lugia, which is what you want to start in pretty much every single matchup. Like just a little bit, which can be, sometimes the difference maker. Call for Family is just insanely broken. That's another reason as to why, you want to be able to have this, card in the active, and you really want to be able to streamline as many Cinccinos as possible. I mean, personally, I've considered, adding a 4th Cinccino as well. Something I've thought about. I think it could be a potential just because this deck really wants to utilize its one prizers. It's not necessarily the same deck as it used to be. We saw, colorless Lugia, like in the past, play things like Mew EX, oftentimes had Squawkabilly as well, double Luminion. It was much more heavy on the V Pokemon and just 2 prizers in general. This deck really wants to, show off its one prize attackers just because of how powerful, things like Cinccino and Snorlax are. You have the Collapse Stadium to get rid of the Luminion, and oftentimes you just want to make your board state entirely one prizers, kind of similar to how Gardevoir EX in the past has ran, where you really just want to utilize all your your Shining Arcanas over and over again, your Screamtails, your Cresselia, all your one prizers. This deck is kind of the same in a lot of matchups, where you might want to use your Summoning Star, potentially even Collapse Stadium the Lugia away, and then just use your attackers like Cinccino and Snorlax. So that's personally how I think the deck should be played as of right now, and this is my list for it. But anyways, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what you think of this deck list. Let me know if there's any Pokemon that you've been considering in here that you think I should add in. But with that being said, we're going to be doing some more consistent Temporal Forces content coming out, especially with major tournaments like the European International Championships coming up, and also Orlando Regionals and Perth next month as well. So anyways, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate all the support as always. This is Smart TCG, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out.